Hey, we're
I gotta
live.
see
All
what
right,
you.
guys. Well, I want to start off by saying thank you to everybody who's getting a chance to join us here for the Lit RPG and D&D panel. My name is Ryan. I'll be the moderator for this panel. I want to thank this prestigious panel of specialists here who are going to be joining us and then talking a little bit about their books as well as how they interact with D&D, things they've done in the past with that. I want to give each of you a chance to begin with some shameless plugs for your books and anything you have upcoming that you're working on. Shami, would you like to go first?
Yeah. I'm Shammy, like the car cloth, Stovall. If you Google my name, there really is only one other person with my name, and that's some sort of Middle Eastern soccer player. So it's really easy to find all my books. Um, I guess in terms of LitRPG, I have the Nexus games. And the reason I'm excited for this panel is because I based the system in the Nexus games off of a homebrew D&D system that me and my husband made. So I really love tabletop gaming in general. It's super fun. I've done it since I was about 18 years old, so for a while now. Not that I want to be like, God, I'm so old, but God, I'm so old. um, so I, I'm just really interested in talking about how tabletop influences LitRPG and things like video games and other things like that. So
Hi guys, I'm jumping in again just because we have been having all kinds of fun tech issues. It looks like they have now been sorted, but the live didn't start when we thought we were live in here. Just started, so if you wouldn't mind reintroducing everyone.
Sure thing. No
Don't
worries.
worry, don't worry. We just started.
Yep, no worries. Well, we'll start from the beginning again. Thanks everybody that's joining us now live for Lit RPG and D&D. We've got some specialists here with us. Again, a star-studded panel that we're going to have for you guys. Want to go ahead and talk a little bit about stuff you have upcoming and introduce yourself. Shami, we'll let you go first.
I'm Shammy Stovall, Shammy like the car cloth. There's only one other Shammy out there, and it's a Middle Eastern soccer player. So if you Google my name, you're sure to find me.
I just
I
googled it. He's actually Indian.
Oh, is he Indian?
Yeah,
Oh, I think his name is Shami Muhammad. So
yeah, it's
that's why I
Muhammad
thought,
Shami. Yeah,
yeah, that's why I thought, oh, okay, he
yeah,
must
yeah.
be Middle Eastern. But there we go. But he's the only other one, so you're good to go if you Google my name. In terms of my lit RPG, I have the Nexus games, and the reason that I'm excited for this panel is because I based the system in the Nexus games off of the homebrew D&D version that me and my husband created. So I really super love D&D, and I've been playing since I was 18. And like I already joked, hopefully I'm not, being too old, but sometimes I feel like, God damn, time flies. You know what I'm saying? But I super love tabletop. I love video games. I love how they interact with each other and how they've made each other evolve. And I think LitRPG is like another process of this evolution. So I'm excited to talk about it.
All right, thanks, Shami. Jeffrey, how about you go up next?
All right. Hey guys, my name's Jeffrey Falcon Logue, and I am the author of a number of series at this point. But my first one is the Slime Dungeon series, where most of my books are based off universe wise. I primarily sort of specialize in dungeon core, which when I was first writing it, sort of the idea of a dungeon, right, comes from Dungeons and Dragons, as opposed to calling it, say, the labyrinths, for instance, which is, I guess, the one real quote unquote mythological dungeon we have in the real world with the Minotaur and all that. I am currently working on two different books. One of them is Dungeons and Recipes, aka the Hungry Dungeon, and the other one is Dungeons and Economics, which is called Dungeon Economics. They're also slime books in the same universe, and they're sort of mirroring what I did with Bio Dungeon, my latest big completed series, and that's biology in dungeons. And I really like the whole fantasy education that came with it.
Very cool. Very cool. All right, Xander, you want to go next?
Yeah, I'm Xander Boyce. I wrote Red Mage series, in which the big D&D influence there is the main character plays Pathfinder a lot, which is my preferred system of choice, and he gets a lot of his spells based around his personality, so they're all, a lot of them are D&D spells, or 3.5 Pathfinder spells. And then my other series, Tall Rock, actually began its life as a role-playing campaign. That world, I've actually played 6 different campaigns in that world. Each of the major conflicts that they talk about in the history was a campaign that actually happened, and I have players that did those. And then I just kind of picked it up at the end of the life cycle there, and played the game. So yeah, I've been playing 3.5 or D&D since about 20 years ago. So I've been DMing mostly Pathfinder, playing Pathfinder for the last 10, 15 years pretty heavily. So yeah.
Awesome. All right, Matthew.
Hey guys, yeah, I'm Matthew J. Barbler. Obviously, I have a funny accent, and I probably should have my video turned upside down. But yeah, look, I feel like I'm a bit of a pretender on this panel, to be honest, because none of my lit RPG that I've done is based on any kind of tabletop Dungeons and Dragons kind of rules. But there is something that I'm working on at the moment that is. I guess I put my name forward for this panel because, yeah, I'm a DM running a campaign with some friends at the moment, and that campaign itself is heavily influenced by a lot of the sensibilities of lit RPG, structure, and all of that kind of thing. So yeah, I'm just here to have fun, I guess.
Awesome. Well, I'm glad that we got to have each of you here. And don't worry about being a pretender. You don't have to have written a book about a campaign to be in part of this. We just expect you to be an expert in all things D&D. That's really all that matters.
Excellent.
So,
well, I hate Wizards of the Coast, so that's the first matter.
Yeah, well, sometimes necessary evils, unfortunately. But we'll go ahead and get us started with a few little questions. Now, most of you have mentioned that you guys have based something that you'd written off of a campaign that you'd had or a tabletop game that you played in the past. What kind of challenges did you run into in translating something directly from the game into the book itself? Sham, you want to get us started?
Yeah. So the thing I had the hardest problems with are dice rolling. Because the dice rolling introduces that random variable, but obviously as the author, anything that I write there, even if I say it's random, it's not random at all because I have to write out everything, including the, that he rolled a 2 and what does that do? And um it's takes away a lot of the suspense. I don't know how to better describe it besides when you're playing a tabletop game and someone's like, "My God, I've got to do this thing, and if I roll a 1, I die, but if I roll a 20, I pull it off." Everybody holds their breath when you roll that die, and even as the DM, I don't know if they're gonna make it, and I'm like, "Oh my God, I hope they make it." Like, but when I'm writing the book, I'm like, "Okay, what for the story beats, for story structure, for this to be a competent story, I obviously can't have it be random." Because it would suck to be reading a story and then 75% of the way through the main character died because he rolled terribly and now he's got to rubber stamp a new character and now new guys here. Like I can't do that. That's
TPK.
so it's hard to translate that like random variability into a structured 3-act story because I need to have my solution, I guess, was to remove the dice rolling aspect and make it a little more hard line with certain types of numbers, that would be variable in a way that it was controlled and not deus ex machina, so that the reader's not over here being like, well, I guess the author just wanted the main character to win, so he rolled a 20. Yeah, like that kind of thing. So I removed a lot of the random variability and just made it kind of like static powers, or highlighted the static powers more than than the random ones.
Cool. Jeffrey?
For me, it was kind of the monsters in a way. I really like slimes. If anybody doesn't
Really?
know me, wasn't clear about that. But when I was originally writing the Slime Dungeon book, the limitations of tabletop games don't always translate into medium with a more, let's say, open-ended approach to approaching any kind of a problem. So, for instance, with the slime, what size is the slime? Do they engulf? Do they hit? Are they slippery? Are they gooey? Uh, how does an adventurer fight the monster? The sort of strengths and weaknesses. You can, as an author, you can make your monster do whatever the heck you want it to do. But in Dungeons and Dragons, there's a bit of a push and a pull that sort of is summarized in the challenge rating. You don't want to fight a monster too strong, and you don't want to fight a monster that's not really going to beat a challenge. So within those limitations, you have to take some liberties bringing that to the table, I think, which I think really is more fun in the author context. But then you try to reverse engineer that, and it's a pain in the butt. I've actually tried to make the slimes I write about into Dungeons and Dragons monsters template, and it just leaves me scratching my head like, how much is too much for a attack roll additive, and the damage and all that. I actually did run a Slime Dungeon D&D campaign for a couple of months with Ramon Major, and was Charles Dean there? God, it's been a while. No, Aaron was there. It's been a while, but essentially it was a disaster because I made the slimes immune to magic because that's how they are in the book. Oh, sorry, immune to physical damage.
Oh.
So
mean DM, mean. All right, Xander, how about you next?
So I think that to kind of radiate the question is how do we adopt role-playing tabletop games into our system? Is I think that any DM, any really good DM, I guess there's two schools of thought here, but I'm in the school of thought that a good DM will fudge dice numbers every time to make it so that the rule of cool, so that the heroes do actually win. And so I do roll just for like those kind of crazy failures in the game or in the system. Like I think there's only one fight in Talrock, and it's Shura rolled a 20 when I rolled for her thing, so she just destroys a whole bunch of people, and everyone's just like, what just happened there? And so I think that there's definitely instances where you can kind of fudge those numbers and make it so that it fits the the 3-arc system without removing all that variability in completely, I should say. So yeah, I like to add. I do roll for all of my games or for all my books. There's some rolling in some variety for all of them. So yeah.
Cool. Well, Matthew, I know you said you hadn't written a book yet on a system like that yet, but if you were considering doing that in your shoes, what things might you do to approach that in that situation?
Well, look, I do have a. Sorry, I actually just got diagnosed with COVID yesterday, so if I'm clearing my throat a lot, that's why. But I'm all good. So there is actually something that I did in Claws of the Dragon, which is my second book in my Edge Force series, where and this is just a personal kind of thing. Like I was set with a choice that I had to make about something that was going to happen to one of the characters of the cast of 5 that was in it, and I had to kill someone. And I had no idea which of those characters that I wanted to kill. Each of them would have sent the story and splintered it off into a different direction. There was probably 2 of the characters that I would have been okay with them dying. So that was fine. They had a number range, and if I rolled on the D20 on a very large range, then either of those 2 who I'd be happy to kill would go. The one character that I did not want to die in the story whatsoever, I put as a 1. She only had a very, very narrow range, and the dice gods demanded blood. So the moment I rolled, it was a 1. So I had to try and figure out, because I wanted to put faith in the process and just say, okay, let's explore this and see where it goes. And it actually turned into one of the coolest moments of the whole book, because this character that is integral to the future of the series was supposed to die, but it essentially acted as a catalyst for the main character's powers to kind of reach another level, for him to really work through this like emotional barrier that I didn't even know he had until that happened. So it actually turned out to make the book a whole lot better. And that was literally just me sitting at this desk, rolling a dice to see what happened.
It's very cool. It's very interesting sometimes how some of that can take an effect in the direction of stories going. So it's really cool to hear that.
And Xander made a good point in that a good DM fudges the dice rolls. But I also think that, at least with my group that I play with regularly, I find that they really want to be in danger. They don't want me to just let them kind of go through, and they regularly pick fights with and do things that they should not succeed at.
I absolutely think that there is those moments where you have one or two characters down and they're like, I've only got like one or two spell slots left, and you want those moments where you're just like, we are definitely going to lose this, and that's when you start fudging the numbers where they do a little bit less damage than they should have, or so that the fight can keep going on, so that they can pull that that by the thread of their teeth victory, where it's not a crit when it could have been, or something like that, and you just kind of it's that you want that skin of the teeth victory, and you could do that by fudging the numbers just a little bit after they've already gotten into that like really terrible situation where one of the characters is already dead, and who knows what's going to happen with the rest of them.
That's true.
Yeah, my guys were, I think, level 2, and they decided to pick a fight with a really powerful fire mage in a tavern in the town that they'd just gone into, and they almost burnt the entire thing to the ground.
Shammy, do you have something to add?
Well, I was just gonna say about the fudging numbers and other stuff like that. The only time that I fudge numbers is usually in the very, very beginning of a campaign, when like a critical hit would then like OHKO you, and that's just no fun. You're fighting a random goblin and he just one-shot you because your HP is so low. That's no fun. But if the player characters, and I tell them this ahead of time, if you make bad choices, I'm not gonna fudge the game to compensate for your idiocy. If you're over here making a fight with the fire mage, I'm just gonna roll normally. I'm not gonna fudge anything. I'm gonna roll it in front of you so that you see just how terribly he's gonna burn you all. Because if you're gonna make stupid choices, you're gonna have stupid consequences.
Well, and I think that there is an element of balancing consequences versus like a good like sometimes you as a GM fucked up and gave them a fight that's way too hard for what they should have been, or you didn't breadcrumb it properly or something like that, and so they're in this fight way before they should have been, and so you kind of have to like, okay, I need to find a way for you guys to not die and end the campaign here, because no one wants the campaign to end. And so if you're going into a TPK, you gotta figure out a way to stop TPKs. Any TPK, I think, is a failure for the GM for the most part. Sometimes players just are stupid and they're doing stupid things, but GMs should be able to navigate around that to some extent.
Yeah, it's kind of one of those read the room kind of rules of thumb. A good GM will read the room, will know where they're going, but at the same time, if you play stupid games, you get stupid prizes. So
yeah, exactly.
All right. Well, we had a question coming here from Kelly. What's everyone's favorite class, homebrew or not? Do you think? So favorite class, even if it's homebrew, favorite class to play. Shammy?
I guess if you're allowing homebrew, in the system my husband and I designed, everybody basically plays a mage, and then you can go down a bunch of skill trees in order to make your mage, specific and unique. And I really like magic just in general, so mages, especially with shadow powers, I'm super obsessed. I'm the one that designed all of the shadow powers in our games, so I really, really love light and darkness and other things like that. So some sort of shadow mage is what I would do.
Very cool. What about you, Jeffrey?
Honestly, it's a bit of a split. it's a pretty easy split in just in terms of just which one is just by the numbers better. But I like being the sorcerer, especially the 5e sorcerer with the sorcery points and all the fun stuff. But flavor wise, I really like being the ranger with the beast partner. Now, the Wizard of the Coast really screwed that one up, unfortunately, just by like literal numbers, not flavor, of course. But I, the one of the games I played, my DM essentially uh, made it so that I had this ring that I could use with my partner wolf. I was a gnome who could ride said wolf as the bow ranger. And if the wolf died, I could bring him back 3 times or sacrifice my own life to bring the wolf back to life. And that was fun, but it's only fun for the early, like the first half of the levels kind of a thing. Because a normal wolf cannot do well after level 8 or level 10, and they don't give you anything really to justify staying with the same animal partner. But yeah, sorcerers are fun. I love being a fire sorcerer, elemental sorcerer with the dragon blood.
Very cool. Xander, how about you?
This is a really hard question for me. I think that I have had great fun playing pretty much every class in the book. I have an amazing cleric that is a cleric of the laws of acquisition from the Ferengi lores in Star Trek,
I
which
was
is
just about to ask.
which is just the probably its current character in Iron Gods, and it's probably one of my favorite characters to play ever. I had an Iron Caster Iron Caster fighter that I played in a campaign that was the son of a brothel whore house and like a protector there, and he was a very prolariat, like very intelligent fighter guy, but he was also like a big beefy fighter. It was always kind of fun. So I think more than anything, it's the role play attached to the character rather than the class itself. Any class can be fun as long as you're willing to put the effort into making it fun.
It's very true. I've seen that happen in the past too, where you play long enough and you're teaching somebody new to play, so you picked the character that fills the gap in the team, but it ended up being one of your favorite characters of all times because of something that happened in the campaign. I've totally seen that happen before. What do you, Matthew?
Well, I guess the one that my favorite one at the moment is one that I'm kind of just working on in the background on a book that is based on TTRPG rules. He's called a craft beer enthusiast, and he's kind of a mix between an alchemist, brawler, a monk, and yeah, I'm essentially designing it from the ground up, having a lot of fun. There's not a lot of balance thought going into it at this stage, because it's obviously its own, it's a book and not a TTRPG as it is. But yeah, he's a lot of fun. One of his first abilities he gets is he gets a different language called Drunken, so he can, whenever someone's drunk, he can immediately communicate with them as long as they can speak, as long as they're both drunk.
As long as they hit blotto.
Yeah.
Awesome. Love that.
It's 3 drinking, Amy.
Yeah, but when it comes to the actual game itself, I have a character that I really, really want to play at some stage. They are and I've kind of been working on this until I have a game to actually play it in, because I'm kind of a forever DM, unfortunately. So he is essentially a halfling or a gnome, haven't decided yet, but it's a druid warlock multi-class situation where they've obviously part of a circle, but they also have an eldritch patron. So all of their animal forms and stuff has a kind of Lovecraftian abomination vibe
You just
to it.
into hentai. That's what I'm getting from that.
I'm not the one who wrote Slime Dungeon though.
I mean, I'm not making acquisitions there, but
Well, I had another one prepared for you guys, because I always like to ask people this. Anytime I play with somebody or meet somebody new, go to a convention, we play D&D sometimes at conventions as well. I always have to ask, favorite tabletop game story of all times. If you could pick one that you just think is, oh my goodness, this I laughed so hard, we wet ourselves at the table while we were doing it, or this was just the most epic moment that we had, whatever the case was. Favorite tabletop game moment. Let's reverse it this time. Matthew, we'll start with you.
Oh man. Oh look, I think I'd probably be the very first time that I ever played D&D. Flew down to Sydney with one of my mates who's a DM, and he's just like, I'm gonna run a one shot for you guys. And it was essentially a mix between I don't know if you guys seen the movie Hellraiser 2. So there's a bit where they go into like this Lovecraftian, non-Euclidean space where there's a giant labyrinth that the characters have to go through. And this one-shot campaign was essentially that Hellraiser world mixed with the Hunger Games, where we'd just been all dropped into this labyrinth and we needed to try and figure a way out. And one of my friends, Tim, was playing a character which is kind of like a Goliath type race, but couldn't speak the same language that any of us could at all. And he had written that he had no equipment whatsoever. So the DM said, well, look, you haven't actually said that he's got armor, so your character starts naked. So he couldn't communicate with us. He was a giant, blue-skinned creature who was completely nude. And he was one of the very first ones that triggered a trap, and then he tried to climb up through a vent in the wall. And then one of the other characters tried to climb up after him, grabbing onto the only thing that he could possibly grab onto, which was the character's dangling bits. And the result of that grapple check was absolutely hilarious. I still think about that game to this day.
Oh, that is hilarious. All right, Xander, how about you?
Gosh, there's almost all of them are going to be not as funny out of context, because it takes that months of building up to a campaign, months of that history to make the characters who they are. But one of the ones that I really enjoyed, we were level 3 or 4, and we were on a boat, and we were fighting this guy in heavy plate armor as one of the big bad guys, and our barbarian just shoved him off the boat, and he drowned because he's in heavy plate armor, and he's got a -10 to his swim checks. And we didn't get any loot off of it, but we killed the boss. So we're like, oh, cool. So yeah, that was always one of those things where the boss is like, where the GM was just like, well, guess we got a different bad guy.
All right, Jeffrey, how about you?
Skip me for the moment because I actually have pictures.
Oh, okay. Well, Shammy, if you want to go then.
Sure. So I just asked my husband, because he's like sitting not too far away from me. And in all seriousness, I agree with Xander. Some of our best moments would be like, I could just take this entire panel in order to describe the context around it, because it was that funny. But I think the funny single joke that I could easily explain is that we had a character and we were playing a vampire game. And I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with Vampire the Masquerade, but you can spend blood points as a vampire to increase your physical stats so that you can be faster and stronger. And in the game, they call it pumping. You're pumping the blood into your body in order to become faster and stronger. A player in the game decided he was going to role play like a fat guy, like a fat nerd who was then turned into a vampire. And he thought it was funny to then really role play out in crazy, exaggerated detail everything that he did. Like walking down the street, he's huffing and puffing. He struggles to get onto a horse or anything like that, and he just describes it in painful detail. So at some point in the campaign, the fat character gets caught in a jail cell, and I sneak into the jail to get him out. And what I do is that I break open the bars on the window that's near the ceiling, and I'm like, okay, climb out of the window. And he starts saying things like, well, since I'm really fat and, I have really low physicals, I can't get to the window. So I drag the bed painfully and slowly over the window. And also I'm breathing heavily, and I'm getting up onto the bed and it's creaking. And he's describing all of this, and then the DM is like, look, you're making so much noise that the guard's going to catch you. And in real life, right then and there, I turned to the guy and I was like, pump, you fat fuck. and I just yelled it like that. And everybody started laughing. And I'm just like, what is with this? Like, why are we doing this? But we were laughing for hours after that. And even, I mean, to this day, years later, somebody might be like, just pump, you fat fuck, just to get, to do something faster. And we were just laughing. So that one tiny joke, we still use to this day, completely out of context, baffling people.
Those are absolutely the best, especially when you get to use them later on with things. All right, Jeffrey, did you get your pictures ready?
I did.
All right, let's see.
Okay, so this is a picture of a rather large board our DM set up for us. So there's 3 players. There's the sorcerer, the cleric bard, and the death monk. So I just want you to picture this in your mind right here. Those 4 white things are boulders that just fell from the ceiling. Right before then, the monk asked for haste. So I cast haste on him. And fun that the player of said monk is a mathematician. So this is what happened. He moved so quickly that he completely scouted the whole boss, arena, because that's what this was, in 6 seconds. So I was sort of like the talker here. So I cast the haste upon the person here, yes, the monk. And a glorious sight was, behold, the monk was so filled with the motion and the carry, he vibrated, but he vibrated so hard he stood still. His legs came together, and his arms went up, and he became the T-pose man. And the T-pose man, he went here and he found the guards, and he went there and he found the ghost lady, and then he found the spider, and then he found the boss. And then he triggered every single thing and trap in the dungeon and came back and said, I found it all. And that was when everybody jumped on him in a giant dog pile. Yes. So he did the calculations. His normal move speed is 120 feet per turn due to his feats and his monk stuff. So we doubled that by dashing. So he's now moving 240 feet per turn. And then under haste, he can do another action, so he can dash again. So he's moving 480 feet in 6 seconds. He stopped 6 times. So we calculated on average he moved 55 miles per hour, but he had to accelerate to double that, decelerate in half the time it took to accelerate 6 separate times. So that was hilarious.
If he'd moved much faster than that, he might have had some human issues with his internal organs moving and stopping that quickly.
Yeah, well, he was a death monk, so he was probably okay with all that.
I've seen some of that in the past where somebody has said, "Oh, can I do this?" And we say, "Well, that's not really how physics works, and you're probably going to die if you do that." So, but fortunately, he had something going for him for that.
I just have to say that like playing with experts in any field in D&D is absolutely incredible. We've got someone in my campaign at the moment who's doing his philosophy doctorate, and the depth that he goes into things that I have not put that amount of thought into is absolutely incredible, and I love it.
It is. It's always a lot of fun. We had somebody who had asked another question. Could you tell us about a time that you spent a significant amount of time preparing for a campaign only for your players to find an easy or simple solution to something you had set up without much effort?
I'm just going to break in and say the story I just did, my DM did a lot of setup for that, and we just triggered every single thing in just one turn. So I'm going to skip this question.
All right. Shammy, you want to go first?
Yeah, there was a game that we were playing. This is another vampire one. I guess the vampire stories are usually the ones that we have the craziest thing. I don't know why, but we were playing in a modern setting. The DM had set it up so that there was an entire building full of vampires, enemy vampires, like the Sabbat. I don't know if you guys have played the Vampire the Masquerade, but if you have, they were with the Sabbat. We're with the Camarilla. All these evil vampires are in this building, and the DM obviously wanted us to either sneak in or like charge in or like fight people. You know, it's supposed to be a really prolonged thing. There's like dozens of vampires in there. We're supposed to have a fight. And somebody at the table was like, "What kind of building is it?" You know, and the DM off the cuff is like, "This type of building." And he's like, "How does the emergency sprinkler system work?" And the DM did some research right there on the fly, and he's like, "There's like a water tank on the roof." And we were like, "Okay, here's the new plan. We drain the water tank, fill it with gasoline, set a fire in the building, and then when the emergency sprinklers go off with gasoline, we'll light them all on fire." And in Vampire the Masquerade, vampires take extra damage due to fire. So that's what we did. We filled a water tank full of gasoline and then set the building on fire, and then the emergency sprinkler system just caused it to go crazy and explode, and then everybody died. And the DM was very upset because he had spent a very long time carefully crafting out a gigantic building with tons of encounters and people and other things like that, and we burned it all to the ground, literally.
Very cool. Very cool. Xander, I know you talked a little bit about the one from your favorite story where you knocked the guy off the boat, but you have one maybe that you set up that somebody had just outthought you or outthought the moment. Unfortunately, it happens to the best of us. But
You know, this isn't from a campaign, but it's actually from one of my books. So I had forgotten that I gave one of the characters the ability to phase through matter. So they use it as a personal defense mechanism, and then later on, that same character gets caught in some thorns and is about to die. And one of my readers pointed out, "Hey, can't she just phase through those?" And I was like, yes, she can. And so she did, and then all of that tension that I'd been building up just went away. And I was like, well, I got to rewrite that story a little bit now. So, yeah, that's probably one of the more relevant ones that I had just forgotten about an ability, and then yeah.
all right,
I'm
Matthew,
sad.
you got one for us?
Mine has a pretty similar ending to Xander's story about the dude jumping off into the water and drowning. So my latest campaign started off, it was kind of a colonial Australian type D&D, flavor kind of thing, where all of my characters were prisoners on a ship, and they had to break out, take over the ship, make landfall, all of that kind of thing. One of them is a ratkin warlock, who has lots of kind of telepathic powers, prestidigitation, all of that kind of thing. And this player just approaches every single challenge in a completely different way than I would anticipate they would. It's a constant source of entertainment. I love it. But this one essentially ended in all of these because this is kind of like how long would it take a colonial ship to get from England to Australia back in colonial days, which is anywhere between a long time. So all of the sailors very hungry. All of the people in the hold, the prisoners that they were bringing over, a lot of them have died. There's only a handful of people left. So they've got rotting, bloated corpses in the hold and all that kind of thing. Through a series of very, very good rolls when it comes to persuasion and prestidigitation and the combination of the two, this character, the Ratkin, convinced the guard who was looking after them that some of the bodies down in the hold smelt exactly like lovely roast chicken, and persuaded them through telepathy to just, you're very hungry, you should probably eat, look at this roast chicken. So that whole story became essentially the rat convincing all of these hungry sailors that all of their dead friends that they summarily murdered as they continued on were lovely plates of roast chicken and chicken soup and all of that. And it essentially ended with the ship's captain and the cook, who was the bruiser, getting pushed off the side of the boat by the monk, and that was that. It was supposed to be this, dungeon crawl through a ship, ending in a great fight and all of that. But no, ended with them literally convincing one of the guys to jump in, the boss to jump in the water. That's it. There was no fight.
Awesome.
And lots of cannibalism.
So much
Yeah,
cannibalism.
this was our first session, by the way.
It's always surprising when somebody takes a turn in a direction you didn't think they were going to go in something that outside of whatever game you're playing at that moment probably would have been really, really inappropriate.
I'm really jealous of this particular character because it's a character that I wish that I had created and I could write about because he is absolutely incredible.
That is cool. Well, that's actually going to be what one of my next questions is going to be about, and I know that some of y'all probably have done this in the past, but actually taking a character that you maybe played yourself in a tabletop game, have you ever thought about or actually gone through with using them as a character in your books in the same way that you did when you played them in a tabletop game? Shammy?
Yeah, all the time, actually. That's probably one of my greatest sources of inspiration is just characters that I liked or situations and events that I liked on a tabletop game and that I've then incorporated into a book. Um, my Nightmare Arcanus series, which is all about bonding to mythical creatures to gain your magical powers, is almost entirely based off of the tabletop game that we played that me and my husband designed. I really like sentient suits of armor. In our game world, they're called puppets, but you can wear them. They can be your familiar and they can empower you. And so I used that as the baseline for the nightmare concept that I used in that book. And Volk, the main character, is based off of a character that I had played in one of our games. Because I really like unironic good guys, like the knights who want to be knights type of thing. I know that a lot of the times people are like, "Oh, that's overdone," but I really like it when it's done really well. So I was like, "Yeah, I'm just gonna do I'm just gonna do all the things I like in this book." And seriously, that entire novel series is just my love letter to everything that I love. So I did all my favorite things. My favorite character from a tabletop game. My favorite type of familiar. I love Pokemon, so we're gonna have Pokemon levels of creatures everywhere in this world. So everything that I like into one thing. So yes, all the time. That's the answer.
Well, never feel too bad about that. I've heard somebody in a different panel talking about tropes, and they said that if you're not using the tropes, does it even fit the genre that you're writing in? So never feel bad about using tropes in this because it just all it does is make it fit better in with the genre. So I applaud you for doing that. Jeffrey, how about you? Oh, sorry. Do you have something else, Shammy?
Well, no, I was just gonna say I totally agree. Actually, that's a good way to say it. Whoever the other person is that you're quoting, yeah, you need those tropes to fit into the genre. So
Yep.
I think that was Dakota.
I think it was Dakota too.
Yeah.
Jeffrey, how about you?
Well, yes, but not a book in this case. I'm actually sort of putting together a YouTube episode kind of a thing with my character and the other characters from that particular story. So this is my character, it's the Dragonborn, and I'm sort of looking forward to it. I've already made a couple of scripts. The problem is just the getting all the art and what it's going to look like.
Very cool. I look forward to that. I'd love to get the chance to go through that once you get it up. Sander?
I mean, other than Tall Rock, which is essentially, like Shammy said, it's a setting that I made for a tabletop game. I loved that setting. I love the idea of the kind of the Western expansion, pioneer era exploration and kind of discovery. So yeah, Tall Rock is my love letter to a campaign setting that I've been a big fan of for decades now.
How about you, Matthew? Is there a character you've been wanting to put into a book that you really enjoyed playing as?
Well, look, to be honest, I've only ever been actually played one session as a character, as a player. All of the other ones I've been running as DM.
Oh, wow.
So a lot of the characters that I've kind of populated my Australis setting with, they are going to end up into something eventually. But yeah, I've never really had that experience of actually playing a character through leveling up or anything like that. I've literally only played one shot as a player, and all of the rest I've been DMing. So I've kind of just been experiencing that side of things through my players.
Cool. All right. I guess not seeing too many questions come in at the moment that we haven't already covered somewhat in what we talked about before. But I guess another question that I could ask is, if you are either watching in some of your cases, having characters played by other characters when you DM, or playing yourself, you prefer maybe the more serious tones when you're a part of something that's everybody's taking this kind of seriously and really involved with it, or more of the derpy characters that kind of come in and you've got the traditional barbarian smash, wizard smart, things like that. Anyone that draws your attention more than the other. How about Matthew? We'll start with you this time.
Well, look, the setting that I'm playing at the moment, it was kind of meant as a sandbox type situation. Like, I didn't have a set big bad, I didn't have a set campaign. I literally just wanted to plonk these guys down into, untamed vastness of what colonial Australia kind of would have been like during the colonization times. And it's really different because we've got two players in this campaign who are taking it very, very seriously. We've got two characters who are also taking it very seriously but making absolutely absurd, ridiculous choices. And it makes the whole thing have this really ethereal kind of like dreamlike feel to it, that even if I had intended for that tone to be as it is, I couldn't have predicted what they were going to do in the world. And it's great.
Xander?
So I generally am not a huge humor person in any of the content that I get. I do enjoy, I had a character, like I said, named Steven, who was very blue collar, but every now and again he'd pull out like a prolariat speech about how the rich are oppressing the poor and how they need to rise up against them and equal economies and do those things that so I like those situational comedies where you kind of have this out of the blue things, but I don't think that those should be a vast majority of sessions in general. And I don't like the the I'm gonna blow up the tavern type role play as a general rule, just because it's not really what I'm looking at for. So yeah, I'm more serious.
Cool.
For sure.
Yeah. All right. Jeffrey?
I would say kind of depends on the situation, because I've played as both, and I have played with both types. So I like, my personal way that I enjoy playing is a character who has some of those goofier comedic quirks. Like the voice I was using earlier was not really great, honestly, but it's sort of my version of Londo Mollari from Babylon 5. And I played the Dragonborn with that kind of voice in mind, and he was obsessed with gems. But he was also really good at messing up the DM's plans, because I liked having situational spells, right? I didn't just have flavor spells, and I didn't just have damage spells. My favorite, of course, being I cast radiation. It's not called radiation in Dungeons and Dragons, but it's literally what it does. But I think a character who's just all the numbers, or a character who is just all the story flavor, they can't on their own contribute to a meaningful story experience. Especially if the DM really heavily leans in one direction or the other, that's the opposite of yours. It's not fun being an illusion player, right? And then you're playing with a DM who's by the numbers, because he won't let you get away with illusionary shenanigans, let's call it.
Cool. All right. Shammy?
I definitely prefer serious stories and serious consequences to actions. I dislike it intensely if even if I'm playing a game, or especially if I'm the DM, if none of the actions matter. If you go into a town and you explode a tavern and light everybody on fire and you literally murdered 23 people and then you walk out of town and nothing happened because of that, it makes it all feel, I don't know, lifeless and just shallow. So I definitely prefer the stakes. The stakes make a story for me, and stakes only come if you think, man, there are going to be real consequences for this. If we don't stop the villain, real consequences are going to happen. If I don't get out of this trap, if I don't defeat this monster, we're all going to die. Like that kind of thing. I really don't like when players are like, well, I just punched the guard captain in the face, and I'm like, oh, okay, well, I guess this entire campaign is over, because how exactly would you get out over this? But that being said, I really do love sarcasm or individual moments of hilarity, or perhaps even hilarious ways to solve problems. Those types of things make me laugh nonstop. And whenever somebody can role play a sarcastic character who's like constantly coming up with quips, like who's very, very witty, those are the best players, because then even a serious moment feels hilarious, because you can make a sarcastic quip to the guard captain and it's not like you're going to get the whole town trying to hang you. You know what I'm saying? It's just now the guard captain thinks you're an asshole, and maybe everybody got a couple chuckles, but we're still having a good time. This is still serious enough that we can continue with the story, but we got some laughs, things like that. That's my preferred style of comedy to seriousness scale. So that's my ideal game right there. Serious story, sarcastic players.
That's cool. Makes sense. All right. So I apologize for anybody who had questions earlier. As Geneva told us, we were having a little bit of technical trouble with these, so all of our questions are having to be posted into our private chat here, and I did miss one. But it kind of goes off what Shammy was talking about just there. When your players kind of go off the rails, not in like a stupid derpy kind of way, but they did something unexpected, or they made this choice that you didn't happen to not foresee when you wrote the campaign or were looking through it before. What kind of things do you guys do to get them back on track and make sure that they're going the direction that you want to as a DM?
I'm going to skip this one. I'm a bad DM.
All right. Let's switch up the order again. Xander, how about you go first?
So I have two rules at my tables. The first one is don't be a dick, and the second one is have fun. And so if that's where the players want to go, I almost always make a robust enough campaign that if they do something like that, I can do it. And I also kind of enforce a lawful, or at least a good or neutral alignment on most of my parties, just because evil campaigns just never work, in my opinion. They just never work. So if they want to go and do stuff, they'll pay the consequences for it, but they can do whatever they want. It's their game, and as long as everyone's having fun, then that's the point of why we're playing. So let's have fun.
All right. Shammy, how about you next?
I've had player parties go off the rails several times. I usually just roll with the punches and change up the story for what they're interested in. I really want the players to feel like they're exploring all the routes that interest them. I think the biggest thing that ever happened really was I played a game that had like a magic tech component, and aliens came down to Earth and were capturing humans. And half of the players in the team were stupid enough to get captured, and I had not planned for that at all. I thought I'd put up enough warning signs and enough things to be like, if you go into this area, you're gonna get captured. And they were like, whoops, fell into that area. And I'm like, okay, I guess you're captured now. So then I wrote like an entire game session where I had to split the party. I don't really like doing this, but for one half of the party, I did a mini session where they were trying to escape being captured. And then the other half of the party, I ran a mini session for them to attempt to save the people. And in my mind, I was like, as long as either they escape or the other people save them, we're all good. But the process of doing this led to its own cascade of actions and adventures that eventually ended up with nuking Las Vegas. But that everybody
The
remembered
wise
for,
course of action.
for a long time afterwards, and we're like, man, remember that game? That was like the funnest game ever. And I'm like, all of that was impromptu. I had to design it all after the fact and think anybody get captured. So I usually just roll with the punches because I want them to feel like they are completely in control of the story. So yeah, that's how I do.
Cool. All right, Matthew?
Yeah, I kind of approach it the same way. Like I like to make sure that the players feel empowered to, because I'm doing kind of a sandbox thing. I like them to feel like they have control over the direction of where they go. I essentially give them breadcrumbs and little bits and pieces of things they might be able to explore if they want to. There is kind of an emerging overarching plot involving puzzle spheres and shrines and randomized dungeons and stuff run by a cosmic games master that they are like engaged with at the moment. But I try to let them make the decisions that they want to make, but also they see the consequences if they make a bad decision, such as the example where they almost blew the tavern up. The mage that was coming to talk to them, he was approaching them to try and offer them a job, to actually give them employment. So it turned the situation into everyone in the town essentially became, well, most of them became almost hostile towards them, until the mage said, "No, I'm going to use these dumb fucks to do what I want them to do, because now they're in debt to me."
That's
Which
cool.
got them back on track to where I wanted them to go anyway.
I think, sorry, just to add on to this, I think there's a fundamental misunderstanding a lot of DMs have, where it's them against the players instead of a collaborative storytelling experience. They're where you're trying to facilitate the players to have fun. A lot of early GMs, I know when I was a new GM, I had that kind of, it's my minions versus them, and I think that ends up playing poorly for everyone. And so once you kind of get around the idea that you are fighting the players, and then switch your mindset to being a facilitator for the players' enjoyment and finding things that are going to be fun, finding things that are going to be, a memorable experience. I think that gets rid of this need to corral them and need to control them into going into a specific way, and kind of opens up the opportunity for new and organic gameplay.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's true. Very true. And for anybody who may be on here who are listening to this later, that newer to tabletop gaming or being a GM, it just comes with time. Being able to, the more you've done this, the more you're going to be able to organically come up with that material that you may or may not have had right at the moment, to be able to go forward with that. Be able to come up with different parts of the town that maybe you didn't think of, interacting with certain people, or even just moving some of the content around to getting to a spot where they are going to be at later on, earlier, just to make sure that you're keeping up with the same storyline that you had for what was going on in there to begin
Yeah.
with.
Definitely, I've definitely had to end campaigns or sessions early, because I was like, well, I need to prepare a dungeon now because you guys went somewhere completely off the rails, and now you're in hell, and I need to figure out what happens when you go to hell.
Yep.
Yeah, definitely.
Right.
So I have had sessions where I've just been like, all right, well, we're gonna call it early today so I can prep some stuff for next time. But
Yep, that totally makes sense. Well, guys, I'm going to put a little time box on us now, because I want to give everybody one more chance at a shameless plug for their books or anything else they want to put out there for us. Shammy, let's start with you.
Again, I'm Shammy Stovall, Shammy like the car cloth. I wrote the Arcanist series, starting with Nightmare Arcanist, where people bond with mystical creatures in order to get unique magical powers. Super love that series, progression fantasy. And my LitRPG is the Nexus Games, and it's basically a death game tournament based on video game side quests, like escort quests or wave defense, based off the tabletop game that I designed. Super love it. Darkly sarcastic, so hopefully you're into that. And look me up. Yeah.
Jeffrey?
Hi guys, Jeffrey Falcon Logue. I write Slime Dungeon, Bio Dungeon, my main Dungeon Core books, Hero of Not, my lit RPG, my game lit RPG series, and my newest book, SCCDE, Station Company Core Detain and Extract, which is your corporate sci-fi Dungeon Core lit RPG. And my next book coming up soon will be Hungry Dungeon. So look forward to getting some real world magical recipes you can use.
Very cool.
Nice.
Sander?
Yeah, I wrote the Red Mage series, which is a post-apocalyptic setting in New York, or sorry, in DC. Wow, Washington DC, set with kind of a fairly unique magic system where you get to find crystals that give you spells and things like that. I wrote Talrock, which is a VR MMO about a guy who's going off to a frontier world to kind of explore and set up a farm. And then I'm also writing a book with Ryan DeBrune, who wrote Ether Collapse and System is Interpret, called Shooter, which is a basketball lit RPG. So it'll be kind of an interesting sport take with a little bit of Jason Bourne thrown in. And
I'll
you
read
can
that.
find me on Amazon or on Patreon. DM Xanadu is my name there.
All right. Matthew?
Cool. I'm Matthew J. Barbler. Have 2 ongoing series at the moment. First is Crematoria Online, which is like Sherlock Holmes type class played in a dark fantasy MMORPG. And my current series is called Edge Force, starting with Bleeding Edge, which is a real world RPG where universe is a simulation and there's a clandestine organization who's found a way to hack reality. Yeah, first book came out from Podium Audio a few weeks ago, and it seems to be going pretty well, which is nice. And I'm currently working on Edge Force 3 over on Patreon and slowly posting to Royal Road as I go as well.
Perfect. Well, I want to thank you guys again for coming and joining us. You all have been great. This has been a wonderful time. I love talking about D&D, and I'm sure everybody else does. I want to thank everybody on Facebook for joining us as well. We've been told we have to wave awkwardly for at least 5 seconds to make sure that everything ends correctly. So thank you guys for coming and joining us.
I'll get the nice beauty pageant wave.
The Queen.
Hopefully we've waved long enough.
I don't